You woke up today. And at some point you probably have to go do something you don't fully want to do. For money, so you can keep existing. That arrangement, a job, is younger than you think. Not centuries old. Not even close. For roughly 290,000 out of the 300,000 years, modern humans have existed. There was no such thing as a job. No boss. No schedule. No paycheck. No career. So what did everyone actually do with their time? The answer isn't nothing. It might genuinely change how you think about your own week. Here's the math worth sitting with for a second. Modern Homo sapiens have existed for around 300,000 years. Agriculture, the first real turning point toward permanent settlements, ownership, and structured labor, only started around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. Jobs in the way we understand them now, with fixed hours, wages, and employers, are an even more recent invention, really only universal in the last couple hundred years. Do the math and it means for roughly 96% of human existence, nobody clocked in anywhere. That should sound impossible. No jobs, no economy, no careers, and yet the species didn't just survive that stretch. It thrived enough to spread across every continent on Earth. So either humans found some other way to structure their time that worked incredibly well, or work was never really the point in the first place. That second idea isn't just a guess. It's backed by actual research, and it's going to be the core of this whole video. This is where most people expect the answer to be life was just endless survival struggle, all day, every day. That's actually not what the evidence shows. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies that still exist today, such as the Hadza people of Tanzania, have found that actual subsistence labor, meaning hunting and foraging combined, tends to take up somewhere around 4 to 6 hours a day. Not 16. Not constant grinding. A number that, compared to a modern 8 to 10 hour workday plus commute, is genuinely less. This observation isn't new. Back in the 1960s, anthropologist Marshall Sahlins studied hunter-gatherer time budgets and coined a phrase for it that still gets debated today: the original affluent society. His argument wasn't that ancient people had more stuff. It was that they had fewer wants, and once your needs are met with a few hours of effort, the rest of the day is genuinely yours. That single idea flips the entire premise most people carry into this topic. We assume no jobs meant constant desperate labor. The evidence instead points toward a lifestyle with real chunks of unstructured time, arguably more of it than a lot of modern adults actually get. So the real question isn't how did they survive without working? It's what did an entire species do with that much unstructured time, for 290,000 years, without a single one of the distractions we now consider essential. Let's go through what that time actually went toward, because this is where it gets genuinely interesting, not just theoretical. Toolmaking and craft. A well-made stone tool, a woven basket, a sewn hide, none of these were quick. Skilled toolmaking could take hours of careful, repetitive effort, and the people who were best at it held real status inside the group. This wasn't menial labor to get through. It was closer to a craft you got good at and were known for. Childcare, shared across the group. Rather than being isolated to one or two parents, child rearing in most hunter-gatherer societies was distributed. Older children, grandparents, and the wider group all took part. This freed up individual time in a way that looks almost unrecognizable compared to the isolated, single household childcare model most modern families run on. Teaching and knowledge transfer. Younger members learn tracking, plant knowledge, toolmaking, and survival skills directly from older members, through repetition and direct instruction. Essentially an entire informal education system, built into daily life rather than separated into a school building for a fixed number of years. Storytelling and oral history. Long before writing, this was how survival knowledge got passed down. Which plants were dangerous, where predators denned, how past disasters were handled. A skilled storyteller held genuine social importance, because the information inside the story had to survive being retold accurately for it to matter. Music, art, and ritual. Instruments like bone flutes have been found dating back over 40,000 years. Cave art, some confirmed to be nearly 50,000 years old, shows clear evidence of revision and experimentation. The same trial and error you'd expect from people with enough unstructured time to keep trying to get something right. Rest. This one gets skipped constantly. Actual rest, sitting, socializing, doing nothing in particular, appears to have made up a real portion of daily life, not as a rare luxury, but as a normal part of the day's rhythm. Notice what's missing from this entire list. Nothing on it resembles a job. Nothing here has a boss, a schedule set by someone else, or labor separated from its outcome. Every single one of these activities directly produced something the person or group could see, use, or pass down. That's the actual structural difference between work in a hunter-gatherer world and a job in ours. If 4 to 6 hours a day of effort was enough, and the rest of the time went toward craft, teaching, rest, and community, what happened? Why did an entire species eventually end up structuring its life around jobs? The shift starts with agriculture. Farming meant you could produce a food surplus, more than the immediate group needed to eat that week. But a surplus needs to be stored, protected, and eventually managed, which creates the very first version of ownership at scale. Ownership creates inequality, because not everyone ends up controlling the same amount of surplus. Inequality creates hierarchy, people who manage the surplus, and people who work to produce it for them. That hierarchy is effectively the seed of the job. Not a natural feature of human life, but a structural side effect of one specific invention, the ability to produce and store more food than you needed right now. From there, the shift snowballed over thousands of years, permanent settlements, specialized labor, currency, and eventually, the modern employer-employee relationship, which in its current recognizable form is only a few hundred years old, arriving with industrialization. So the honest answer to why do we have jobs isn't because humans need structure to survive. It's because one invention created a surplus, and a surplus needed managing. Everything since has been built on top of that. A lot of content on this exact question falls into one of two traps. The first is romanticizing it completely, presenting pre-agricultural life as some kind of relaxed utopia with zero downsides, ignoring real risks like disease, violence, food scarcity during bad seasons, and much shorter average lifespans. That's not honest history, that's a fantasy. The second trap is dismissing it entirely, insisting ancient life was just constant brutal labor with no room for anything else, which the actual anthropological time budget research doesn't support. The 4 to 6 hour figure isn't a fringe claim. It comes from direct field studies of existing hunter-gatherer societies. The honest version sits in the middle. Life without jobs wasn't easier in every way, and it wasn't harder in every way. It was structured completely differently, around effort that directly produced something you could see, rather than labor separated from its outcome by a wage. So here's the actual, uncomfortable question this leaves you with. If a hunter-gatherer thousands of years ago worked 4 to 6 hours a day on things that directly fed, clothed, taught, or connected their community, what exactly changed that has you working longer hours than that, often on something that doesn't visibly feed, clothe, or connect anyone at all? Jobs aren't a law of nature. They're an invention, roughly 10,000 years old, sitting on top of a species that spent 290,000 years doing something else entirely. Maybe the real question isn't what ancient humans did instead of working. Maybe it's what modern life quietly took from us to make room for the job in the first place. Let me know in the comments. If you had 4 to 6 hours a day and no job to go to, what would you actually spend it on?